Welcome to the Daily Education Policy Show. I'm your host, Stephen Onley, and tonight we're examining the Every Student Succeeds Act. Yeah, buckle up, it's Education Law Night. ESSA is the federal law passed in 2015 by the Obama administration that finally replaced the No Child Left Behind Act. Look, No Child Left Behind was highly criticized for its heavy reliance on standardized testing and rigid one-size-fits-all approach. Its core requirement that 100% of students reach proficiency in reading and math by 2014 proved to be completely unattainable, because shockingly, not everyone learns the same way. It became clear that the law needed a major overhaul. So what did ESSA change? On paper, a lot. It shifted significant power from Washington and granted states the authority to design their own accountability systems, set their own goals, and determine how to intervene in struggling schools. In other words, Washington said, you deal with it, and threw the clipboard at the states. Under No Child Left Behind, they use this thing called adequate yearly progress. Under ESSA, AYP has been eliminated and replaced by multiple measure accountability. States still report test data, but it must be combined with at least 4 other indicators that ideally paint a fuller picture of student progress. Each indicator needs to be broken out into the same 4 subgroups of historically marginalized students identified in No Child Left Behind, because if you don't separate the data, you can't see the gaps, and pretending they're not there doesn't make them go away. Now, while the states have the primary control, the federal government still maintains its role in enforcing equity for these historically underserved student groups. So it's less feds in charge and more feds hovering over the clipboard saying, we're watching. But under the current Trump administration, Education Secretary Linda McMahon has been approving state plans that are not in full compliance with federal equity requirements, reflecting a broader rollback of diversity initiatives. The question now is whether this balance between federal oversight and state flexibility can actually close long-standing achievement gaps, or if it just perpetuated disparities by relying on the same old standardized testing while giving states the discretion to define success. Tonight, we'll explore that balance. Spoiler, it's complicated, but at least it's not
100% proficiency by 2014.
complicated. So let's dive in, because No Child Left Behind wasn't the beginning of this story, not by a long shot. Over to you, Kelly.
Thanks, Stephen. My name is Kelly Greger, and to really understand ESSA, we've got to rewind to 1965, when President and former school teacher Lyndon B. Johnson, in the middle of his famous War on Poverty, signed the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or ESEA. This was a huge deal. ESEA created Title I, which gave federal funding to schools with high percentages of low-income students, and acted as the first federal law in U.S. history to put any type of federal funding behind public elementary and secondary education. And yes, Elementary and Secondary Education Act really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? But ESEA was not a one-and-done law. It was designed to be reauthorized every 5 years to continue to ensure access to equitable education for all students. Although it has only been reauthorized 8 times since its original passage, we're going to explore some of the major changes it has undergone tonight, starting with 1968, when Johnson expanded ESEA with the Bilingual Education Act, the first federal law to fund bilingual education programs. Critics later argued that it slowed down English acquisition, and it was eventually replaced under No Child Left Behind with the English Language Acquisition Act, shifting instruction almost entirely back to English and adding standardized testing. This all evolved again under ESSA, shifting authority to the states and giving schools a little more flexibility. Sorry, spoiler alert. Let's get back to the 70s. It's 1979, and Congress reauthorized ESEA during Jimmy Carter's presidency, this time allowing schools with at least 75% of students below the poverty line to use Title I funds school-wide. Before that, low-income students were pulled out of class for special instruction, which meant they missed their regular lessons. Not exactly a winning strategy. In 1988, ESEA was reauthorized through the Hawkins-Stafford Elementary and Secondary School Improvement Amendments, which strengthened Title I accountability by requiring school improvement plans and pushing states to raise academic expectations, particularly for low-income students. Now it's 1994, and you know we're shaking things up because President Bill Clinton decided to rename the law altogether when Congress reauthorized ESEA as the Improving America's Schools Act. This version of ESEA lowered the threshold for school-wide Title I programs from 75% to 50% of students in poverty, required states to create high-performance standards for reading and math, rolled out an early version of adequate yearly progress, and tied federal funds to student performance, all in the hopes of finally closing achievement gaps and seeing America's public schools, well, improve. Then came 2001, and under President George W. Bush, ESEA was again reauthorized, this time as the No Child Left Behind Act. This one went all in on accountability. Annual standardized testing, a push for highly qualified teachers, and strict adequate yearly progress targets, which you better hit.
Or else.
And by
Or else.
I mean, best case, you have to offer free tutoring, and worst case, your entire staff gets fired and your school closes down. And with ESEA's reauthorization as the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015, you're finally up to date. President Barack Obama used this law to shift power to the states and eliminate both adequate yearly progress and
The 100% proficiency.
or death requirement, opting to replace them with state-designed accountability systems using multiple measures of success, while the feds keep an eye on equity. Are you tired yet? I know I am. But more importantly, has ESSA been successful? Well, that's our next segment. Over to you, Victoria.
Hi, I'm Victoria Bryant. ESSA is made up of 9 titles, or segments of the Act, covering all students from pre-K through 12th grade in federally funded public schools. Title I is the heavyweight, with about $18 billion a year for schools with at least 40% of students below the poverty line. This funding is meant to supplement, not supplant, state and local funding, requiring school districts to show that they are using Title I funding for Title I provisions only. Imagine the paperwork. Title II allocates funding for highly qualified teachers and other school leaders, and Title III is the most recent reauthorization of the Bilingual Education Act. Title IV, aka 21st Century Schools, funds a student support and academic enrichment program for well-rounded education, safe and healthy school environments, and of course technology, because apparently we can't prepare students for the 21st century with 20th century PowerPoints.
PowerPoint.
Title V provides funding for rural schools through the Rural Education Achievement Program and allows for federal transferability, where educational agencies can transfer money from one eligible ESSA grant to another, though there are some major restrictions, and unfortunately, the mountain of cash under Title I is not up for grabs. Title VI funds culturally relevant academic supports for Indian, Native Hawaiian, and Alaskan Native students, and Title VII funds schools with high numbers of students living on federal property, along with caretakers working federal jobs or serving in the military to help compensate for loss of tax revenue. Then we have Title VIII, the junk drawer of ESSA, called General Provisions, and it contains some leftovers not covered in Titles I through VII. Finally, Title IX ensures that unhoused and foster care students can access free public education. Big picture, ESSA is trying to close achievement gaps for low-income students, English language learners, students with disabilities, and students of color by reducing standardized testing and increasing flexibility for states to create locally relevant, evidence-based solutions. To do this, states must identify the lowest performing 5% of Title I schools, high schools with graduation rates below 67%, and schools with chronically underperforming student subgroups. From there, these schools must create and implement comprehensive support and improvement plans to track student progress over time. So is it working? Well, it depends on who you ask. State flexibility sounds good on paper, but given that states can set their own school rating and accountability systems, a school labeled excellent in one state might be called needs improvement in another. Though these plans are created with educational agencies, families, educators, and other members of local community, Washington still gets final approval, and failing to meet accountability measures, which by the way still include standardized testing, can result in forfeiture of Title I funding. And as of 2025, under President Trump, schools running illegal DEI programs are threatened with losing that Title I funding too, a brand new tension going far beyond ESSA's original design. And on that note, back to you.
Thank you for joining us tonight on the Daily Education Policy Show. So, what will the next reauthorization of ESEA look like? Well, that may very well be up to the people in this room. To start, let's see what you've learned. Grab your phones because it's quiz time.